Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to episode 3 of Trigger Warning Radio. I am your host, the Kaiju Conservative, and of course, ladies and gentlemen, the big news for the last week has been the brutal school shooting down in Parkland, Florida at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. Of course, we all know the story. We all know what happened there. Frankly, a little psycho just barged into the high school that he was formerly expelled from, and when the dust finally settled, 17 people were dead, including several teachers and over a dozen students. Now, of course, we've entered into a new national conversation about gun control because the left has demanded such a thing since the Parkland shooting, as they do after every mass shooting. Of course, the left's solution to gun control is ban all the guns. Increase the amount of background checks that you have to do, increase the number of restrictions and regulations, and just outright ban some types of guns. Of course, the main goal is they want to eventually ban all guns. Now, we do need to have a national conversation on gun control, ladies and gentlemen, but it's not the one that liberals want us to have. Because quite frankly, gun control legislation, increasing the amount of gun laws that we have, is not going to work. Banning guns is not going to work. There's not a single gun law that you could enact that would have prevented the shooting at Parkland. There's not one law that would have prevented Nicholas Cruz from walking into his school and shooting 17 people. It just doesn't happen. Criminals are not deterred by laws. But we do have to do something, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, the students of Parkland, down in Parkland, they are demanding action. People across the country are demanding action on both sides of the aisle. And I think I've come up with a couple of solutions that we can enact nationwide that may not stop school shootings, because let's face it, evil people are always going to do evil things. There's no way we can actually completely stop school shootings, but we can minimize them to the point where they are extremely rare. Now, I've come up with a 3-point proposal, ladies and gentlemen. I wrote an article about it on Sparta Report. I'll go ahead and put the link to that in the description below so you can click on that and peruse it at your leisure. But my plan relies on 3 things, 3 points. The first one is stationing armed guards at schools across the country. The second one is arming school teachers, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And then the third part of my plan is going to be adding resource officers to every school across the country and increasing the number of resource officers that are in schools where they already exist. And I'm going to go through this point by point with you guys, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to start with armed guards stationed at every school. So the first thing that we have to do if we want to really get serious about preventing school shootings and protecting our nation's children, we have to make sure that all schools across the country are protected by armed security professionals. Now, these men and women that are going to be doing this job of protecting our nation's most precious resource, these men and women are going to be visible. They will be armed. They will be obviously armed, and they must be ready and willing to lay down their lives in order to protect the students in their care. Now, with these security guards, what do we do? How do we implement that? Well, first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that there are security guards stationed at every entrance and exit at every single school. Ideally, between 2 to 4 security guards at each entrance. The guards would be active and they would be visible during student drop-off in the morning. They would also be active and visible during student dismissal. They'll be, scanning the crowds for any suspicious activity or behavior, and they'll be, ready and willing to respond to any situation that might arise. Now, These guards will be armed, just like normal security guards. They'll be armed with pistols, but there will be a security station where potentially you could keep rifles like AR-15s or similar rifles locked up just in case they are needed. Now, what purpose would these security guards serve? Well, these security guards would serve two purposes, ladies and gentlemen. First, the guards would be a deterrent to any would-be school shooter. So, just, a school shooter walking up to a school that they are going to enter and seeing armed security guards and armed presence that they will have to fight through in order to get into that school, that right there is going to be a huge deterrent for a lot of people. There's not too many school shooters that are going to risk getting killed before they've even begun their rampage. There's very few people are that crazy, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there are some people that will be that crazy, and for those people, the security guards will be able to respond with deadly force if they need to. But just the mere presence alone of the security guards being there, that right there is going to stop, I would say, a majority of potential shooters in their tracks. Even the most jaded individual is going to think twice about assaulting a heavily armed target. Now, that goes into the next point. The second function that these security guards would serve would be as a first line of defense against any would-be school shooter. So these security guards, like I keep saying, they are going to be trained to respond with deadly force to any attempted incursion into the school. And the goal, of course, is going to be able to put down the school shooter before they ever take aim at a single student. Now, who would these guards be? Who would we hire? Well, there's a couple of sources that I think we could go to. First and foremost, we would go to a company that has a reputation for professionalism and a reputation for excellence. And there's many private security companies around the country that would be able to do that. That will cost money, of course, but I think we can spare the expense. I don't think there's too many people that would object to paying more money to protect our children. However, if you do have people who object to the cost, I'm sure that we could always find some retired law enforcement officers or some veterans that would be willing to protect schools for free on a volunteer basis. I'm not too concerned that we couldn't find quality people to protect our children. Now, the second part of my plan would be arming school teachers. And this is something that has already taken place in a lot of schools across the country, in a lot of different states. It's something that, for example, the state of Florida had introduced a bill back in 2015, debating whether or not that would allow school teachers to be armed. That measure, of course, failed, but it's going to be taken up again starting February 20th by the Florida State Legislature. So this is something that's been talked about for many years by people on both the right and the left. Now, of course, the first thing that we talk about is going to be, well, do we arm all teachers? My answer to that question is no. We're not going to arm all teachers. What we're going to do is we're going to have a pool of teachers that can, they will be volunteers. There will be a form that they can fill out, whether it's part of their contract that they sign every year or whether it's part of, just a standalone form. But that form is going to be something where they can indicate whether or not they want to volunteer to be armed in the schools. Of course, these teachers are going to be screened. Teachers with prior security, law enforcement, or military training will be given priority, followed by any teachers that have any firearms training. And these teachers, nobody's going to know who they are except for a select few individuals in the schools. There's the principal and the select administrators will know. The teachers themselves obviously will know who is armed, but it's not something that's going to be advertised to the parents, and it's not something that's going to be advertised to the students. Why is that? Security. We don't want any potential school shooter that gets into the school to know exactly where the armed resistance is going to be. And these teachers, once they're armed, they're going to be, spread out throughout the school. They're going to be armed daily on a rotating basis, so you never know who is going to be armed at any given time. Now, the third thing that I want to talk about with the third part of my plan is going to be adding resource officers to every school across the country. What is a resource officer? Essentially, a resource officer is a cop in a school, and the resource officer is there for crime prevention. A lot of them also teach classes as well, and they also act as community outreach for the local police department. So, not every school in the country uses resource officers. Conservative estimates put it at about 1/3 of all schools in the country that use resource officers. So we need to increase this to 100%. And for those schools that already have resource officers, we need to increase the number of resource officers that we have. Ideally, I would say about 3 to 4 resource officers per school across the country. They'll serve, their normal function of crime prevention, community outreach, education, that sort of thing. But they'll also act as a liaison between the school officials and local law enforcement in the event of an active shooter situation. So these police officers, they will be able to help coordinate any potential response within the school, and they'll be able to give active real-time intelligence to any law enforcement personnel that are responding from outside of the school as well. Plus, as an added bonus, that's, a couple of extra people who are armed and trained in case a shooter ever gets into a school. Now, there's a lot of guns being put into the schools at this point. This plan is not without controversy. It's not without its bugs. I'm well aware of that. But I think this gives us a very good starting point to have a conversation about how we best protect our students. Because, as I said before, ladies and gentlemen, banning guns, increasing the gun laws, that is not an effective means of protection. All that's going to do is just take guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens and keep them in the hands of the criminals. Because as we all know, ladies and gentlemen, criminals do not obey the law. Strangely enough, that is why they are criminals. Now, you're going to have people that are going to say, well, this is going to scare the kids. There's going to be too many guns. They're not going to know what's going on. I think this plan can be implemented in such a way that if the students are involved in the conversation and they know what's going on and they know that this is for their protection, I think they won't have a problem with it. I think it will minimize any fear that they might feel with that. The other flip side of this, of course, is the monetary cost. There's going to be a lot of people on the right and the left that don't want to spend the extra money. And to that I say, screw you. This is about protecting children. Money should not be a factor. If it saves one life, it's worth the cost. If it prevents one school shooting, it's worth the cost, no matter what. And for those of you folks on the right who might not like it, you know what? Just take a couple $1 million off of Planned Parenthood's funding. There you go. Problem solved. Well, guys, what do you think of my plan? What do you think of this plan to protect our schools? Is it hogwash? Is it brilliant? Do you have your own ideas that you want to add? Go ahead, drop me a line in the comment section, or let me know on any of my social media profiles. I'll provide all the links in the description below. And before I end things, folks, I just want to apologize that I have not done one of these podcasts in quite a while. It's been crazy with the day job and a whole host of other things. But I am committing to a schedule, ladies and gentlemen. I am committing to a 15-minute podcast every single week. You can find me Tuesday at 8 a.m. every single week on YouTube, BitChute, PewTube, and Spreaker. I'm going back to my Spreaker channel, which is why the 15-minute uploads. Anyways, guys, thanks so much for listening, and I will see you all next time.